We are recording.
Fun.
Okay. All
All
right. Well,
right.
welcome everyone. I'm Susan Sloan. Tonight's program is creating a bird-friendly lawn. We are going to talk to you about a lot of the different things you can do to add to your lawn, to add value to your lawn for birds, and for humans. We're going to start out with a really cool deep dive into the history of lawns. Like, how did we get here? And it's a strange journey. So that's a really cool one. Oh, if you need inspiration after you watch this program, just come by our garden at Bylane Farm. Oh, we got one more person entering. Okay. Um, if you stop by the Leon Levy Native Habitat Garden at Bedford Audubon, we have lots of the plants that we're going to be discussing here. And you can see them sort of in action. The garden and the grounds are open to the public dawn until dusk every day. And stop by. We have signage out there. We have bloom guides when there are blooms. Not quite blooms yet, but we will have that. And if you're interested in volunteering, we've got plenty of opportunities, either in the garden or in the surrounding sanctuary and habitat. So Steve Ricker, who you will meet, does habitat renewal volunteer days, and those are really cool and great opportunities to learn about uh, what we do and good best practices for native habitats. So tonight's presentation is not going to be delivered by me. We have naturalist and Bedford Audubon board member Steve Ricker. We have landscape designer and horticulturist Missy Fable. And we have volunteer extraordinaire and amazing native garden educator Beth Metzger, who will be presenting for you. We're going to start actually with Beth. So just one little point of clarity before we begin. If you have questions, please add them into the chat. We're going to go through all the questions at the end of the program. So as the program goes on, if there's any questions you want, there'll be plenty of time at the end to go over the questions. So just enter those into the chat and we will address them at the end. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Missy and I'm going to mute myself. And here we go.
You mean Beth.
Sorry, I meant Beth. I meant Beth.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right, so we're going to start with our history lesson. And we'll look at this picture here. If a few hundred years ago you lived in this home, you would be at risk for lurking danger. So wildlife could be right outside your door, or invaders from afar could be approaching your home. And you wouldn't know it because you couldn't see them from all of the vegetation until it was too late and they were right upon you and your family. In this home, with the vegetation cleared, you'd be a little bit safer because you would see what was coming long before it got to you. And the larger your cleared space, the safer your family would be. It kind of functioned a little bit like a moat. Now, the only problem with these clearings was that they were expensive. It required a lot of resources to clear all of that vegetation, and to maintain that clearing required resources. Also, at a time when land ownership that was used for anything other than food production was quite a luxury. So these large clearings of land became a display of wealth. The bigger the clearing around your property, the wealthier you probably were. And this deeply rooted symbol of wealth and social standing was carried over across the pond into modern day America. Our modern day golf course-esque lawn aesthetic, though, didn't really show up until the middle of the 20th century. And there's a little history behind that as well. In World War I, the federal department that was formed to develop chemical weapons found itself in need of reimagining its purpose during peacetime. And so they kind of thought, we have all these toxic chemicals. They're really good at killing people. Maybe we could use them to kill pests. And they did that. They were great for killing pests. The bottom left picture is a World War II soldier getting his dose of DDT sprayed on his head, which was common practice at the time. So essentially, chemical warfare got a rebranding as pest control and garden care. One particular example is the Rocky Mountain Arsenal in the city of Denver. If you've ever flown into Denver, you've seen this. It's a massive grassland park right in the middle of the city. It's 17,000 acres, which for frame of reference, Central Park, our biggest park in our city, is 900 acres. This one is 17,000 acres and it is right between the airport and downtown, and it is a massive Superfund site. It got there because in World War II, chemical weapons and manufacturing plant was developed in that space. And after the war, it pivoted, it had to rebrand itself, and using the same arsenal of chemicals that were used to make weapons and chemical manufacturing, they switched and pivoted to producing pesticides and fertilizers that are now marketed towards the farms and for residential use. So this story also has the bald eagle strewn throughout the story. It is a victim and a hero at the same time. So look into it further if it's an interesting story if you wanted to hear more. So post World War II, lawn care saw a huge influx of chemicals, which transformed residential landscapes into manicured and monocultured lawns. So what didn't change was the association of large lawns with status. But what was new is a new perceived enemy. So things like dandelions um, and clover were not perceived as a terrible addition to a lawn. They actually were encouraged at times before the war. But now this new clean and sterile aesthetic and the social pressures to conform eliminated them from lawns. So basically, we were kind of fooled into thinking that our worth can be measured by the size of our lawn and that the lawns are worth less if not maintained as tight and compliant monocultures. So next it's Steve.
Okay, can you everybody see that? Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna just talk to everybody about, by the way, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. What I'm gonna talk to you about is just what types of birds, converting from turf grass to a more habitat focused landscape, no matter how big, will attract and affect and benefit from this practice and why they'll benefit. So here we have two examples of if things work out, we have a fox sparrow on the left, and a Swainson's thrush on the right. So these birds, most sparrows are going to benefit more if you have, say, less turf grass, but still have grass and forbs that you let grow taller. While the Swainson's thrush is more of an understory, so that's going to be if you reduce your lawn, which we'll talk about later, and convert, lawn to maybe not necessarily tall grass, but to more of understory, flower beds, things like that, shrubs, they'll benefit from that. So how impactful can this be, right? Okay, big deal. I've got a small yard. I convert to, native plants, maybe reduce my lawn, maybe just grow, sedges and tall native grasses instead of lawn. What kind of impact can I have? It can really be incredibly impactful. There's one particular study done by one of Doug Tallamy's students. I'm sure probably all of you have heard of Doug before. A big proponent of this conversion of our lawns to native plants, our landscapes to native, more habitat-focused gardens, keystone species, all that stuff. Anyway, one of his students did a study comparing suburban landscapes, kind of, your typical, like Beth was showing, post-World War II monoculture, a lot of turf grass, a lot of maybe some native, non-native shrub, foundation plants, compared to, say, what we're trying to tell everybody to try out, which is the more focused um, native plants. And it was astounding. It wasn't just one or two more times as much bird species. It was 8 times as much bird species. In particular, it was towhees, tanagers, and thrushes. So it can be quite beneficial, and make a big impact, especially when it comes to insects, which we'll talk about next. Not next. Next, we're going to talk about seeds, first of all. So for me, what I like about this is I like watching how birds feed differently, how they feed naturally, as opposed to when we throw bird seed out, put bird seed in feeders and things like that. It's not necessarily the natural way they find food. So by creating kind of a more natural landscape, you get to see these unique foraging techniques that they use. On the left here, you got some goldfinches, or really small, light, dainty birds. So here on some taller grass, they're eating the grass seeds that are on this grass, but they're so light they can kind of balance, and they're very agile, and they're going to be like the flying loendas, kind of going around and turning upside down, and bending in all contortions and grabbing grass seeds, which is cool to watch. On the right, below right, you'll see kind of a more robust bird, a song sparrow, which they're too big. They're going to land on a grass stalk, and it's just going to bend down. So they have what I call the kind of the bear technique, which unfortunately we're getting a little more exposure to. Bears are so strong, they'll just take small trees with berries on them, like cherries, and bend them over. Same thing that these guys do, except with seeds. They just bend them over, sit on them, and eat the seeds. On the right, top right, I have another unique plant I want you to think about, which are rushes. Rushes are another kind of forb grass-like species. They have a really cool inflorescence like this that comes out mid-stalk or near the top of the stalk on some of the species. Another really cool native plant that you might want to think about if you have a wet area, especially. Okay, so now let's talk about the big impact that you could have by doing this, and that is insects. Okay. We're hoping that you're not going to use many or any pesticides. You're going to convert to more native lawn, native landscape type plants, tall grass, not too much mowing. You're going to really promote insects. How does this affect birds? We're talking about birds here, guys. So birds are going to be affected by this a bunch, because 96% of all bird species, all land bird species, rely on insects at some point of their life cycle. Here you have, of course, these are two insect eaters throughout their whole life cycle. So you have on the left a Carolina wren, on the right you have a bluebird. They're eating insects their whole life. But what about the goldfinch? What about the song sparrow? Actually, not the goldfinch, but the song sparrow at least. They're going to be feeding their babies insects, even when they're young. But when they grow up, they'll convert more to seed eaters. But they all have to be fed what I call mother's milk, which is for birds, insects, and that's where you're really going to promote really beneficial help techniques for helping birds. Um, so that's where they're going to find them. You've probably heard of another study, famous study from Smithsonian, who they did a study on nesting Carolina wrens. And to successfully raise a nest of Carolina wrens, they had to feed them. And think about this, they're pretty much feeding their babies for about 2 weeks. 9,000 insects in 2 weeks. So that's a lot of bugs. You don't see all those bugs. You probably don't want to see all those bugs, but they're there if you have these natural landscapes. So you're really helping survival rates and success of young raising rates by doing this. So it's like we said, it's super impactful. We can really make a difference by doing this. Another kind of often forgotten about benefit to these native, more natural landscapes is cover or shelter. This is going to be helpful for all the time, but also specifically for baby birds who maybe aren't quite flying, proficient at flying yet, and especially birds who tend to be more just ground walking birds. Like here you have ruffed grouse on the left, and you have some turkey babies, turkey poults on the right. So these birds are mainly on the ground. You guys probably know ruffed grouse are pretty much locally extinct in our area. But in the 1990s, they were still here. Um, and they're probably extinct because we don't have much young forest anymore. Most of our forest has converted to mature forest, and we are not kind of, planting young trees. We have lawn, we have, a landscape, and then we have mature forest, and that's about it. You've got two choices for the most part. We want to increase those choices with these diverse landscapes that we're talking about today. So the rough grouse, we're hoping maybe can come back with some management practices, not necessarily in our yards, but on a larger scale in some of our parks. We're hoping maybe we can do that. This is also, if you don't know, this is a spook bird. This is a bird who is really secretive, really camouflaged, and then they pretty much explode right in front of you and scare the living daylights out of you when they fly away. And even worse is this female with her babies. This happened to me right in the 1990s as I'm walking out to the mailbox. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw this animal coming at me, like literally just aggressively coming at me, and immediately thought there's something rabid coming at me. And I ran and got scared and looked behind me, and it was one of the mama, and she was going back into the woods clucking as her babies are following behind her. So she was warning me to stay away from her babies. But that's the spook bird we hope to bring back. If you're super lucky, you could get a nest on the ground. Some specific birds are ground nesters. Song sparrows, this happens to be a meadowlark nest. Meadowlarks are more, they need larger areas, so probably that's not going to happen in most of our lawns. But there are other species, like I said, song sparrows, who could benefit from these nests. Unfortunately, you're probably never going to know they're there. If they're singing, they're probably there, but they're really tough to find. And then if you have more of, say, the a forested maybe landscape, you're going to be promoting other ground nesters like ovenbirds, who you've probably heard of, who make a very cool oven-shaped nest right on the ground. Very hard to see, amazing camouflage, but they're going to be safer if we go to these practices as well. Um, so yeah, nesting can be another benefit of all this. And then, like Susan was talking about before, this looks like it's full, but the woodcock displaying, so these areas are more open areas. I don't have a really big, super big yard, but I do have woodcocks displaying in my yard this time of year. So super unique if you get a chance to go tag along on one of those hikes. And then one of my bucket list things is on the right here. This is turkey eggs on the ground, right on the ground in the woods. I've never found them. Now, there can be birds who are just dropping by also, but they wouldn't drop by unless you had the welcome mat out. And this is what we're talking about, the welcome mat for these bird species who are relying on more cover, more field, more long grasses, mowed turf is not really welcoming. It's like, come here, and if you land, you're probably going to get eaten by something. You're a sitting duck, so to speak, if you spend too much time on a mowed lawn for most species. So you're creating these oases, and you might attract some of these birds. It's kind of a fleeting attraction because they're kind of stopping on their way north or south. On the left here, we have a really secretive bird called the Nashville warbler. And on the right here, we have maybe not quite so secretive, but a field sparrow. These were attracted to my yard last summer. You can see I have a water feature too, so that helps as well. Pretty easy to do. We also can show you that in our in the garden at Bylane too. And this is also, if you've never heard a field sparrow sing, after you're done tonight, you should go on to All About Birds and play the field sparrow song. It sounds like it's described as a ping pong ball bouncing on a table, but it's better than that. Then in winter, you're going to also attract birds that you wouldn't attract unless you had this welcome mat out. And this is on the left here, American tree sparrow. And then on the right here, mainly during migration, another migration kind of stop is the Lincoln sparrow, another cool one. So a lot of these pictures, by the way, that are not so great, they're mine. And they were taken by my a little portable kind of security camera that I can move around and put at different spots in the garden to see who's coming there. And some of these birds I never saw myself. I only saw them on camera. So you might be surprised at what's coming, but you won't know they're there if you're not there to see them. So one of my favorite things about this type of gardening and this type of creation of these habitats is mowing paths or creating paths through them so that we can walk and enjoy these areas. Um, and one of my favorite activities is to mow these. Sometimes I have to mow these areas. And when you're doing that, you may look behind you, and in the summer especially, there could be a whole bunch of birds following you. And you may not know why. Why are they following me? They're following you because as you're mowing through there, you're kicking up all the bugs. They're moving out of the way. They're in the stuff on the side. And all these bluebirds, especially during this time, during the summer, they'll come down and they'll start grabbing bugs. Tree swallows will do it too around here. That's very common to have them come. And then also you could get the other bug eater, dragonflies on the bottom right here. They're not necessarily going to land on your nose, but they'll follow you too. Sometimes swarms of them will follow you, and just grabbing bugs as you mow through these areas. A really fun activity and another foraging thing to see. Wow, I'm really feeding these guys all times of the year. Other animals will also benefit. All the animals will obviously benefit from this change, but one of the most important ones locally are eastern box turtles. These guys are really in trouble. Again, locally endangered. They won't be on a state list because across the state they're not endangered, but in our area they definitely are from fragmentation and mowed lawns and things like that. And mainly where they lay their eggs, they like to lay their eggs in the dirt. So they have a lot of times no choice but to lay them in a mowed lawn, and that's pretty much, 99% fatal for their eggs. You can see on the right, here's eggs that were dug up by a fox. Normally in a natural habitat, they're gonna bury them underneath the root ball of a native clumping grass, which most of our natives are kind of clumping grasses, and they put them right under there as extra protection. You have long grasses growing all around it. It's very hard for the animals to even smell that, as opposed to the mowed lawn where they can smell everything all across the entire lawn. So it's going to benefit them. Um, these things, these landscaping habits. It's also going to benefit the insects, and mainly a lot of moths. You may start to hear more about moths. Moths are really the driving force in all the insect populations, that will help, especially the birds. There's 11,000 different moths in the United States. There's 400 different butterflies. So it's really the moth caterpillars that are driving the food chain in a lot of these. And guess where moth caterpillars pupate? Guess where their cocoons are? They're down in the tall grass and in the leaves. They're there. They're not going to be there if you get rid of leaves. They're not going to be there if you mow the grass. They're not going to be there if you use pesticides. So pretty simple. Fireflies as well. So I just want to show you one last thing. We talked about these cool things you could possibly observe by doing this. And one of my favorites is watching the turkeys eat the grass, from the seed stalks. So it's kind of this what I call zipping. And this is a very horrible video as far as quality is concerned. But I still, if you especially look in the lower left-hand corner here, you'll see one of them is zipping the seed heads off. I think it's Tridens flavus. Is that what we said it was, Missy?
Yes, I'm not seeing the video
No, I
play.
haven't shown it yet.
Oh, okay. Yes, we
It's
said it was
it's
trident.
short, so
Yeah, sorry.
just setting it up. So this is, I think it's also called purple top if you're interested in this grass. I have a lot of it growing around. Okay, let's see if this works. Right here. You can see him zipping this guy right here in the lower left. Zip, zip. So yeah, that's a cool thing. Okay, I'm gonna pass it on to Missy.
Or I
Beth.
think Beth.
Beth again,
I'm
sorry.
All
last.
good.
Thank you.
All right. Can you see? Excellent.
Yes.
All right. So your hand is on the dial of how much your lawn supports birds. So after listening to Steve, if you're ready to dive in and dial it up to a 10, we're here for you. But if you're not quite ready, that's too big of a step. If you want to start small and just nudge up to one, we can do that for you. We're here for you for that too. So the best thing to do is to eliminate your lawn entirely or to reduce your lawn. But I know some turf grass, traditional turf grass areas are either desired or, like I said, maybe you're not quite ready to say goodbye to it entirely. We know that they don't make the best bird habitat, but if you are going to keep some of your traditional lawn, the maintenance practices are a big problem. So we have some suggestions here that can help you with that. Simply put, if it is good for the environment, it's better for birds. So a healthier environment for humans and the lawn will be better for the birds. We have a few suggestions for keeping a traditional lawn healthier. So I would ask, but the answer is going to be obvious. What do you think? Which crop in the United States do you think uses the most water? It's not corn, it's not soy, it's turf grass. And most of us are overwatering our lawns. Most lawns need maybe an inch per week. And you can measure that with a simple device like the rain gauge on the left. You can get one less than $5 from Amazon. Or if you have an irrigation system, just make sure that it's not set to indiscriminately water on a timing with a timing device, but instead be in sync with the natural rainfall that we're getting in our area. And also make sure that you maintain it. You know, if the spouts are tipped or broken, you might be watering your brick patio instead of your lawn. Heavy lawn equipment, the blowers, the mowers, they can compact your soil, which is not good for any plants. And we already know the ills of gas equipment with the noise and air pollution. The Michigan State University did a simple study where they looked at mowing height and the effect on the health of the grass. And they mowed some areas, the traditional short height, and then some other areas they mowed a little higher. Most lawnmowers have a setting, like in this picture here, where you can adjust the height of your mower. But what they found at this in this study was that the grass that they had mowed higher was actually healthier. It was more dense and it had better drought tolerance than the traditional shorter level. So, sort of a rule of thumb that I'm seeing across most extension service recommendations is grow to 4 or 5 inches and then mow to 3 or 4 inches. And when you mow, just like any plant, a goal is to not remove more than about a third of the living material at a time. So that means that you need to do regular mowing. Don't wait 3 weeks in between your mowing, or you're going to remove more than a third, and that stresses out your grass. Mow when the grass is dry. I know it's tempting to just mow whenever you happen to have the time, even if it just rained. But this can make uneven and torn and ragged cuts, which stresses your lawn and it leaves the tips brown and it doesn't even look good. Also, if you happen to be mulch mowing, like the picture on the right, it can be sort of matted and it blocks air and water and sunlight from the lawn below. A lawn that's mowed regularly is never going to get to seed, so you'll need to reseed. And Mid-August to mid-September is the optimal time to do that, not now and not in the middle of the summer. Fall is the best because the soil temperature is still warm, but the temperatures outside are starting to cool off. The water demands are decreasing, and the weed pressure is a little bit lower. So fertilizer on lawns and agricultural use causes runoff that leads to toxic algal blooms, which can severely impact birds. One study looked at songbirds and found immune and reproductive stress, and it can cause neurological damage or even death. And obviously, birds aren't reading these signs that we post in areas of water that are toxic. They're still swimming, they're still foraging, and getting sick from it. And one thing to note, chemical fertilizers are definitely the worst culprit, but organic fertilizers can also cause problems from runoff. So just keep in mind quantities and follow instructions and even better use composting lawn clippings. Nature has the whole feeding the lawn or feeding anything figured out already, like the nutrient cycle image on the left. Organic matter goes in and then it becomes available in the soil to feed the plants again. And same thing with the lawns. If, like the middle picture, you're removing all of your clippings, then you're blocking that nutrient cycle. If you leave your clippings, then you're leaving, eventually, it will become food for your lawn. All right, now that we know from our little history lesson where these chemicals come from, we probably know we don't want to be using them in our lawns. Also, they often harm or almost always harm more than just the target species that you're going for. Also, if you are growing a pollinator lawn or a pollinator garden or doing anything that you're trying to attract wildlife in or moths or butterflies in, and then you spray with pesticides, it's what we call an ecological trap. Like you're luring them in and then you're harming them. So we try to avoid that. And then speaking of ecological traps, no mow May. If you, which you've probably heard of, where people are encouraged not to mow their grass in May, but traditional turf grass is a cool season crop, cool season plant, so it's doing a lot of growth in May. If you wait until June to cut it, then it's going to have a chance to grow and get pretty high and look enticing for wildlife to move in for cover. And then in June, if you go and you mow, you're going to disturb them or worse, kill them if you mow them with if you just go over with a giant mower. So that's another ecological trap. Plus, it's not good for your lawn. Um, Waiting until it gets high, you're going to have to cut more than a third of it. And then you're stressing your lawn out in June, just as the temperatures are starting to rise and stresses from the environment are increasing as well. So that's nudging the dial to a 1. But if you want to amp it up even more and have your lawn even more beneficial for birds, Missy is going to help us with that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and let me go to the presentation. All right, so everyone can see okay? Yes? Okay, well, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some lawn reduction techniques and replacements. So let's get started. Just to reiterate, as Beth said, lawns are resource intensive, not only water, fertilizer, but also humans too. It's tiring mowing a lawn. Um, so Beth covered some of this, but I just kind of want to reiterate that lawn is the single largest crop in the United States. It covers about 40 million acres, which is roughly the size of Wisconsin. The water it uses is tremendous. Again, the largest irrigated crop. It's about 18 trillion tons, or not tons, excuse me, gallons of water each year, which, as you can see, is sort of large enough to fill the Chesapeake Bay. And then also, as Beth noted, when we have large storm events or storm events, a lot of lawns that have fertilizer have been fertilized, that runs off into our storm drains, our rivers, our streams, and is a real source of pollution and potential toxicity to wildlife and humans. So as Beth was kind of mentioning too, you kind of have your like one, dial one up to 10. And so this one has nothing to do with the number of the scale, but basically, this is my first point is that you can diversify your lawn just by allowing some things to grow in there. For example, dandelions. A lot of us probably already have violets in our lawn and clover in our lawn. Violets are a wonderful source of food for early pollinators. It's also a host plant for the painted lady butterfly. Leaves are full of vitamin C. Clover, not native to our area, but still a great source of pollen and, well, really more nectar, I'd say, for bees emerging in the earlier in the season. And then also provides a source of nitrogen in your lawn. So it's actually adding some of those nutrients that our fertilizers would do artificially. And these are both clover and violets. You can mow over them and they will still um, they'll survive, basically, if you're mowing high. So another thing to think about is if you're letting your lawn if you're letting these I'm not going to call them weeds, but these other kinds of wildflowers into your lawn, you're already giving some diversity. But the other thing you can do is start to reduce the square footage of your lawn. And the way I like to think about it is to start to think about the edges of your property. As Steve was saying, right now we basically, a lot of our landscapes sort of consist of lawn and then trees, and we're missing that shrub layer, certainly in our forests, and that's really because of deer pressure. So any way that you can start to add shrubs and shrub thickets to your lawn will definitely benefit birds. They'll provide shelter and cover. Um, but if you start to work your way from the edges in, you're sort of still maintaining whatever you might need for leisure or sports. But again, you can start to reduce it that way. Let's see what else. So reducing your lawn. So how to do it. There's a few different methods. I think probably many of you are familiar with these. First is you could just get a sod cutter. That can be pretty labor intensive. If you have a landscaper do it, just remember sod is really heavy. You will probably be charged for that off-site dumping fee because it is so heavy. The other options are one is sheet mulching, where you would use a combination of newspaper or cardboard and mulch. And that would basically kill your lawn by smothering it. There has been a little bit of, I don't know if debate, I guess debate a little bit on the use of sheet mulching. I have seen some studies where they say that it actually reduces some of the water and oxygen airflow. But over time, as it breaks down, that actually just it's not as much as a factor as the mulch breaks down and the newspaper breakdown, and the soil biota is still intact. Whereas solarization and occultation, so solarization is using clear plastic. Basically, that acts like a greenhouse and it solarizes, effectively kills everything through through solarization, whereas occultation uses black plastic. And in that case, it actually starves the plants by not allowing them to photosynthesize or have access to water or nutrients. Both of them require a lot of plastic, and I tend to shy away from adding any more plastic elements into our environment because they are a huge source of many kinds of other ails rather. But if you're going to do solarization, you need a really hot, sunny site, and occultation again doesn't have to be as sunny, but it's something, it's an option. So scalping is something that I think is being done experimentally. I've heard anecdotally, whereas basically, as Beth was saying, lawn is turf grass is cool season, so it really actively grows in the spring and in the fall. So if you're going to try scalping it, what you would basically do is just mow it to its lowest height, right? Because we're going to stress it out, right? Now we're not worried about keeping it healthy by mowing high. Mow it to its lowest height, or the lowest setting on your mower, rather. All through the spring, through the summer, and and even into the fall, depending how it goes. And what happens is you're stressing it out so much, it starts to die, especially with the heat of the summer, if you're not irrigating it as well. And then you can kind of thatch it, rake it out, and then try planting seeds or planting live plants into that area. And then, so that's one way to reduce your lawn. And herbicide, I like to think of as a last resort. It can be a tool in your toolbox, but you have to really consider the biological costs because it will kill everything, including soil biota, especially if you have to do repeated applications. So it's just something to keep in mind if you have to resort to that last resort. So I talked about sort of reducing our lawn by adding edge or native or plant species on the edges of your lawn. So these are just a few examples of some of those that you can add that are also high value for birds and other wildlife. So flowering dogwood, it's an understory tree. It's wonderful, beautiful flowers in the spring, wonderful berries in the fall for migrating birds, full of lipids. Hawthorn tree is another one that berries and serviceberry. This is one that blooms like May, and then the berries come out around June, and they are edible. So if you can get to them before the squirrels and the birds, you're lucky. It's called serviceberry actually because that's one of its common names. In addition to Juneberry, because the berries come out and form in June, is because it was in colonial times when this was blooming, it told the settlers that that was time that the ground was thawed enough for them to bury those who had died in the winter. That's an anecdote I've heard. American holly is a great, it's actually not really, it's not an understory tree. It's slow growing, but it can over time get to be 60 feet tall. And it's shade tolerant, which is kind of a nice thing. It's also great for owls. Steve told me if you want to look for owls, you should look in hollies. Just a couple more plants to add. Magnolia. We have a native magnolia in the Northeast that's not as showy as the saucer magnolia we might be familiar with, but still a wonderful plant. And I should add that these are plants that the deer tend not to browse. There's no guarantee with deer, and all trees especially should definitely be protected in the fall for sure from bark rub, from deer, from rub, from buck rub. But these are ones that the deer tend not to browse. Spice bush is another one, and witch hazel, which you can kind of see the old blooms right now and the really cool seed capsules. Spice bush likes it a little bit wet, and so does our magnolias. Spice bush is really a nice alternative to forsythia if the conditions are right. It blooms about the same time. It's not as bright yellow, but it's quite stunning in its own way. And then just a few more shrubs I wanted to point out, some of my personal favorites. One is witherrod or Viburnum nudum. This has wonderful fall color, and the berries persist through the winter and then are eaten by birds. And it's one that of the viburnums that there's a leaf beetle out there that tends to attack our native viburnums. For some reason, I have not seen this as a problem on witherrod. I've also seen it rarely browsed by deer, whereas some of our other native viburnums are browsed by deer, particularly Viburnum dentatum. Carolina sweet shrub has really interesting flowers and fragrance, and bayberry, which can form a really nice hedge. It's pretty adaptable, won't like it really wet, but it again, it's one of those that you can kind of train into a hedge. And if you're going to think about adding a hedgerow, it's also nice to add a mix of species instead of just one species. Just give a little more biodiversity, a little more interest. Okay, so if you're going to go up to 10 and decide that you're going to just take your lawn out or just start fresh if you have an area where you can start fresh, there are other alternatives. And some of you may have already heard of no-mow or seed or eco-grass. These are it's like generally a mix of native fescues, pretty much, that can take You can get them in sun, shade, mixes at excuse me, other any conditions really. But however, just because it says no mow doesn't mean you don't have to mow it. They do require some level of maintenance. Usually mowing once or twice a year, in the late fall. There's a lot of they're readily available. I know Prairie Nursery sells a lot of them. They also have information on how to get them established. And then here's a warm season grass. Beth had mentioned, or Steve had mentioned, our warm season grasses. They don't really start to grow until soil temperatures reach 60s, I think, 60s. And again, this has wonderful fall color. And it's something that you can use. It has a very soft effect, and you can see you can see the lawn in the background. So again, you can have just a swath of it and still have your lawn in the background, which gives you a little bit of a cue to care. And sedges. How many of you might be familiar with sedges? You can put it in the chat. So Mount Cuba is a botanic garden in Delaware. And last year they came out with, sorry about that. Last year they came out with a report on sedges. They're grass-like, and they are wonderful ground covers. You can basically find a sedge to fit any condition you might have, from wet to dry to shady to sunny. They provide food in the winter. They're habitat for invertebrates, for turtles, for a range of amphibians. And you can actually mix them to get a lot of diversity of diversity of texture. But one of the things Mount Cuba did, which is really interesting, is they tested them against regular mowing. And they found out that there are, in fact, 4 sedges for lawn replacement that can pretty much take regular mowing. I don't think it would, not every week mowing, or every 3 or 4 weeks kind of a thing. Foot traffic, they did not necessarily experiment with, but basically that these sedges responded to mowing and they were fine and they still grew. Carex Pennsylvania sedge is a wonderful, one of my all-time favorites. If you guys go out for a hike in the woods in the next 2 weeks, this is the one you'll start to see blooming early on. It just carpets the forest floor. It's delightful. And strawberry. If you have a small area, strawberry might take over, but if you want it to take over, it can be a great lawn replacement. This was the middle slide is a picture of strawberry lawn in Garden in the Woods. Dan Jaffe Wilder, this was one of his first experiments with lawn replacement, was to just use our native strawberry. And it actually held up to foot traffic, not playing soccer, but people are able to walk on it without really doing it harm. It can be really vigorous. It's widely adaptable to various conditions. It can be a really great substitute, and it feeds wildlife, and it would feed you too if you get there first. Wildflowers. So pussy toes, this is one that you actually might already have in your lawn and not know it from regular mowing. It likes kind of dry conditions, really full sun. It's the host plant for the painted lady butterfly. Oh, I misspoke. The violet is the host plant for the great spangled fritillary. Sorry, I got that wrong. This is the one for painted lady. Beautiful fluffy white flowers, little delicate flowers, 6 inches, and then this beautiful fluffy white seed heads in later in the season. And yarrow. So yarrow, you can see on the left, this is kind of just looks like it's just been mowed right next to the turf. So this can be a wonderful addition to your lawn, or if you already have it, you can let it grow and encourage it. It can be mowed. If you want the flowers, what you can do is you can kind of leave little islands or drifts and just work with it in, however you want it to kind of be in your landscape. It is really hardy once established, and it will spread. It's not the same yarrow. Well, excuse me. The yarrow you might get at the nursery that has, colors of pink or orange or kind of purplish. those are not as hardy as those are selected cultivars for their colors. It's this our just kind of straight species native yarrow is the one that will perform best in a lawn situation. And Pacra, this is a wonderful substitute for Pachysandra and Vinca and ivy. It is evergreen and has beautiful yellow flowers in the spring. So I really like it under shrubs. If you're looking for a ground cover to put underneath your shrubs instead of the ones I just mentioned, this is a great option. If you want to, again, just kind of remove your whole lawn, this will give you something evergreen plus beautiful spring flowers. Likes it a little bit moist and sort of shady, but it's highly adaptable. If you have enough moisture, it can grow in full sun, no problem. And then I just want to say, when you're thinking about if you're going to do that lawn replacement, whether you sort of let it diversify naturally by allowing things to come in and establish, or you start to add other different wildflowers or sedges, just be creative, mix it up. This is at Cornell Botanic Garden. They have a lot of experiments on lawns that they've been doing natural lawn care, natural lawns. And so I would encourage you to check them out. And we do have a resource list that we will be sending out after this presentation. And that is what I have to talk about. And then here is just a little more information from us about our garden and the Leon Levy Habitat Garden. So with that, I can stop shares or do you
You
want
can
me to
leave
leave
it
this
up
up and
if
we
you
can still do
want.
Q&A?
Yeah, you can leave it up if you want to leave it up. If anyone is interested, the information that's on your screen right now has pictures of our garden at Bedford Audubon. And the QR code will take you to our website, to the page on our website, which talks about our native habitat garden. So you got some information there. It'll also give you some links to come and volunteer with us if you want to. So let me look on the chat and see if we've got some questions from anybody. Um, oh, I just have a little heart from Ida. Thank you, Ida. So I guess I should ask, is anybody have any, well, if anyone has any questions, you can either add them in the chat or you can raise your hand, and I will try to see you, although I don't really see everybody right now.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing so we
Yeah,
can
maybe
see
we'll
each
we'll
other.
stop share. Okay,
There we
now
go.
I can
Now I
see all
can
your
see.
faces.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Um, so I'm seeing a question from Carolyn. She's being very sweet and thanking all of the amazing speakers. Is it too late to plant now for the summer? So,
No,
Carolyn, what plants are you talking about planting for the summer? You can
Just
unmute
in
yourself.
general, let's say you want to convert half your backyard to wildflowers and dig it up and
Mhm.
plant some of the bushes and sprinkle some seeds. When can it's always a good time to start digging. Is that the motto? I guess that's what I'm asking. Like,
That's
yeah.
a great question.
and where do you go to get the stuff? So if I'm ready, I've got a shovel in the ground. Um, right? I'm ready. Where do you go and when do you start?
So I can answer that. Yes, now is great, actually. Um, so you're there are, a few retail nurseries that might have, some of the species you're looking for. The first thing I would say is definitely look at your site and try to understand your site conditions in terms of your soil moisture and your sun exposure. The Native Plant Center, I don't know if people are familiar with the Native Plant Center. They have an annual plant sale the last weekend in April. So it's the 25th this year, the last Saturday, I should say, in April. There's an opportunity to purchase some native species there. Um, but no, I think spring is a really good time before it gets too hot. Anything shrubs, you do need to water for establishment, but if you get them in early enough, you're sort of kind of beating that summer heat. If you're giving them like a good 8 weeks or so before the summer heat really kicks in. The other time is in the fall, August, September. So if you decide you want to smother your lawn now, a section of it and then plant in the fall, that works too. So just make sure you really understand what your site conditions are. And there's so much information out there about plant species, in terms of what your goals are.
Missy, do you know Wild Gardens
Sure.
Nursery in
Mm-hmm.
Cortland?
Yes,
Carolyn, I think that's a good one just to get ideas. Um,
agreed.
they've got the plants right there. They've also got a website, Carolyn. You can go to I think it's Wild Gardens, wildgardennursery.com. And they're
And
local. They're
and
in
they're local.
Portland.
Yes, definitely. And support their local, definitely. They're great. And they're
And
growing a lot of their stuff from I think from seed and from so they're really
they
Great.
stand behind their plants if you buy it from
Yeah,
them
those are
because
great tips. I was wondering because I've shopped around and then you look online and no, don't buy online, and I wasn't quite sure.
there
Okay,
are
these are great tips. Thank you.
there are a couple, and I think Missy mentioned Prairie and Prairie Moon Nursery. Those are good online resources. But if you're like me and you just need to kind of see it, that's a good place to go.
Okay,
And it's all
thank you.
native, I think, right, Missy?
hmm I believe
Okay.
so. I believe that's all she does is natives.
And she can
Okay,
answer
great.
your questions if you have
Right,
them.
right. Thank you.
Oh, and somebody mentioned Hilltop Hanover Farm, which is
Yep,
another really good one. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marina. I always forget about them, and they do have great, and they also have a really great farmers market.
yep.
Uh, like really good. Okay, so here's from Ginny. Insects welcome, but would like to have conditions that discourage ground bees or other buzzy. So you're talking about like yellow jackets, right? The ones that yeah, any thoughts about that? I'm gonna maybe Steve, how to
Yeah,
survive potential
I
attacks.
guess it depends. There's a lot of bees and things that nest in the ground. I can uh I can remember a volleyball game that
Oh
was
God,
quite screaming children as they're called cicada killers. They're pretty impressive
vicious looking.
wasps. But yeah, but they're pretty harmless, but it didn't matter. It was fun to scream, and be scared of them. But
I think
yeah, if you're
though,
talking about the yellow jackets, that's definitely an issue. The problem with yellow jackets is they can be there most of the spring and summer, and they won't do anything. And then all of a sudden they get to a breaking point where their
mm.
population's really big, and they're like, "Hey, we can sacrifice a few people to go sting you." Um, so they get very aggressive. Um, and so if that's just diligence trying to figure out where they are and paying attention, but it's hard. It's very hard. With a lot of the other ground nesting bees, they really like sandy soil.
Mm.
So if you happen to have sandy soil, they're gonna be there no matter what. So you definitely want to, I think, um, move to a different area, or you may want to even, I would say, even put patio stones there. But even then, they like the little edges of the patio stones, But it's possible you could change that substrate to something else.
Mm.
But they are pretty much harmless. I've never been hurt by most of them. It's just those yellow jackets that are the pain in the butt.
The yellow jackets can be aggressive, but if you know where the nest is and you really steer clear, because they really only attack you if I mean, Steve, you can correct me, but they only really attack you if you're too close to where their nest is. And if you
Yeah.
oopsie too close,
And
you
you
get
know
got.
what? To tell you the truth, the animal that eats yellow jackets is probably one that nobody wants around. But those skunks, they eat yellow jackets. They're good to have around.
That's why I love
You
them.
know, obviously, don't mess with them, but they're good because they eat yellow jackets.
Nice,
I had a vegetable garden that was saved by a skunk once because it had yellow jackets in it, and then the skunk came along and got rid of them for me. So.
nice. Up there. Okay, I have to conclude Ginny's question with I guess she was answering she doesn't know what kind of bee, but they chase my husband and he doesn't run as fast as he used to. And I feel like as long as you run faster than him, you're good. That's
And if
terrible
you have a
advice. I'm sorry,
pool,
don't take that
if you
advice.
can jump in a pool, that's good too. But
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question from Ida. Do you have to smother your lawn in order to plant natives? Can you just dig out the grass in clumps. Missy, do you want to do that one?
Sure. Yeah. Yes. I have heard that, and I have heard that that can be successful. I think the key is to make a large enough hole to lessen competition from the grass roots, which, as we've all talked about, are pretty shallow. But once I think that plant becomes established, and their roots go down below, the level of the grass roots, I think that's fine. I have heard that that's worked. I haven't tried it myself, but I wouldn't discourage it. If anything, if you're going to do it, I would try to plant instead of just sort of one plant here, one plant there, do a grouping, like maybe do like a group of 3 or 5 in an area. So, dig out a large enough area for that, and try that. And then try to use plants that, if you do your research, that might spread by underground roots or are a little more competitive, aggressive. Um, that might be something to also consider as you're just selecting the plants, for your space. So yeah, I would try it for sure.
Missy, do so you clear the space and you put the little guy in there. I would
Not
say
that
maybe
little.
you have to keep um, weeding around it though.
Right. So I would exactly. So like I wouldn't do it with a plug, right? I wouldn't do it with a very small plant
Okay,
material,
so
but
you're
with
talking about like a
a
more
one
established,
gallon.
bigger.
Like a
Got it.
yeah, something that's like a 1 gallon.
Okay.
I don't know that I would do it with a quart either unless you really clear it around it. So something that's
Got it.
already got a lot of root establishment in the pot. Um, and then, just, you know, make the circle or the area that you're digging it in, give it some birth. I can't tell you exactly, but I don't know, a few inches or so. So it's not just up against the grass. So you've got a little kind of moat, let's say moat, like Beth is saying, you've got a little moat around it to protect it.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, I have heard that that works. And I just don't have personal experience, but I've talked to other people who've said that it works for them. So
Um, yeah, I think I tried actually I think Susan Fisher, one of our past board members and board president, planted plugs, which you just told us not to do, in an area where she didn't clear it, and they got overwhelmed. She just lost all of them, I think, pretty much all of them.
yeah, I'm not surprised. You need something hardy if you're going to put it in that because think of lawn as a competitive environment,
Yeah.
right? So it needs,
Yeah, I mean, I've mainly done it where I reduce the lawn by coming in from the sides, just expanding beds and things like that.
Hmm.
So doing it, step by step that way. I guess, yeah, I have planted something in the middle of lawn, and yeah, I do like make clear a big area around it, and put some, mulch there too to try to suppress. But if you want, I wanted to mention the strawberry. If you want to see it in action, you can definitely come to the Leon Levy garden to see. And then the Native Plant Center also has demonstration gardens, don't they, Missy?
yes, we
Yeah.
do actually. Yeah. So please come.
Yeah, see it in action,
That's,
see these things
yeah,
in action.
that's at Westchester Community College. If anyone's not familiar, they have a couple of demonstration gardens.
Um, oh, Marina just put a really great link in the chat for everybody. Healthy Yards has a nice list of local native plant nurseries and mail order ones. Ooh, I'm going to check that out. I didn't know that was on their website. So that's a really great tip. So it's in the chat if anyone wants to see it. And then maybe we can add that to the maybe to the resource, or I'll put it in the email at the end because that's a really good thing. Because yeah, they're a great resource, Healthy Yards, uh, as are we.
And we're sending out, right? We're sending out a list
We are.
of
You're
resources.
all
Yes.
going to get a follow-up. This has been recorded, so you all get the recording of it and a list of resources.
And thinking of healthy yards, I know we're past time, so one more thing, I'll let everyone go. So Bedford 2030 and Bedford Audubon are going to be doing a hike together in May.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like a little preview, kind of hike and learn where we're going to be walking the property at Bedford Audubon, Steve and I and others, and really talk about native plants, native plant communities, invasive species, showcase the garden. And so you'll get notified from Bedford Audubon, but just throwing it out there.
I'm going to actually also, because we have a April program email that's coming out, and because that's in May, it's not going to be on the April
Oh,
program.
well, yeah, I
But
just
I'm going
figured.
to add the information about it um, on the email that I'm sending all of you to follow up. So all of you guys will have a preview on that one. So everyone
Thank you.
who attended this workshop will get first dibs at signing up for that one because it's going to be a really good one. It's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be a wonderful way for me also to learn a lot. It's why I joined the committee because I learned so much from these guys. Okay, wait, hold on. Oops. So everybody's just giving their thank yous. Thank you, Richard and Adrian, and thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate all of your time. And if anyone thinks of another question that we didn't get to, or if you're like me and think of stuff long after the event, you can email me at info@bedfordaudubon.org, or when I send the follow-up in the next couple of days, you can just reply to that. It's going to take me a little bit to get the video so give me a couple days on that, and I'll send the follow-up information. So unless anyone
Thank you,
else,
Susan, for doing all this, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Susan. Thank you,
I bring
everybody.
so much.
Thank you. It's
Thank you,
great.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining.
Good
Appreciate
night.
it. See you
Bye-bye.
soon.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.